Hey, Senda.
Hey, Phil.
Do you want to do a grab bag for November?
Yes, it's been so long since we did a grab bag.
Grab bag episode! Cue music. And welcome to another episode of Panda's Talking Games. I'm one of your hosts who's going to answer 3 questions tonight, Phil.
And I am your other host who's also going to answer 3 questions tonight, Senda. To be clear, they are the same 3 questions.
Yes. So a couple things. If you are relatively new to the show, one, we continue to remain unedited. Soon I'm going to not talk about, in 2021, I'm not going to talk about that because that's just how the show is going to be in 2021.
Right, we will just have changed.
Unscripted and unedited.
Yes.
So that's first thing. That is what it is. Second part is we are going to do a grab bag episode tonight, which we have not done one in months. So in case you are new to the show, Senda, what's a grab bag episode?
So grab bag is where we take multiple questions, usually 2 to 3, and we just kind of answer them all, short form, right? Like bing, bang, boom.
Yeah, sometimes there are questions that just require a short answer. Like, we're not able to really pull a whole episode out of them. In the past, in the pre-COVID times, grab bag episodes were shows that we did before we were leaving for a con.
Yes.
We would do them as an extra show because we don't script grab bag episodes. We just do the questions off the cuff. Now we just do whole shows like that.
Yeah.
But a grab bag was almost always the sign that we were either leaving for a con or coming back from a con. Like if a grab bag showed up, we were not around.
Because it was our record an extra show because we were not going to be editing or recording while we were traveling.
Because that is folly.
Yes. There were a couple of times we learned that lesson early on, I think.
Yes, like 1 or 2 times you tried that and it was like, this is dumb.
This is not happening.
There was also 1 or 2 times where we attempted to be like, oh, while we're there, we'll record the audio.
No.
So we got out of the habit of that and we got into the habit of the week or 2 before we were leaving for a con, we would double up and record 2 episodes, and one of them would inevitably be the grab bag. But the grab bag's just a fun way to clear topics that are also ones where we're like, I don't know if we could do a whole show about it, but it's a good, it's a worthy topic for discussion.
Yes. Yep.
And inevitably one of them is funny.
Right. Usually the last one.
Usually the last question. No, what you call it?
Premonition?
No, I'm just saying.
Foreshadowing?
Foreshadowing is maybe a good way to put it. So with that, I don't think there's any other announcements we need to make. As far as the recording of the show as we head into the holiday season, we're pretty much still just going to do it.
Yeah. We're just going to do it. If we get into a situation, we can always do 2 at once. Remember when we used to always do an A show and a B show? I know, those were long nights.
Those were long nights.
But we'll sort it out, or we'll let you know on Twitter, etc.
I think if we're going to wind up with anything, it would be closer. It would be like closer to Christmas or something like that. Yeah, but I don't know.
I don't think we'll miss anything around Thanksgiving, probably.
No, I don't foresee we will because I'm not going to be on the road. Sometimes I don't like to do it because I was like on the road and recovering.
Yeah, you were driving.
That Monday.
Yeah, you're not.
But not.
Because we're all shut down. There's no Thanksgiving parties happening here.
We're all locked down. Okay, so cool. Then why don't you tell us our first question for tonight? Sure.
Yeah. So our first question is from David R., who is AD and David on Twitter. That's funny. And David asked, how do you get players to provide more of their character's background and personality when they're used to just providing the characters I'm going to replace with species and class?
Yeah, no, that's great. So in this case, this is a case where maybe from I'm just going to infer a few things, right? So maybe these players aren't accustomed to playing games with deep backgrounds, or maybe they're just kind of playing, like they started playing casually and they're just, like they grabbed like either pre-gens or whipped up some characters and played and didn't really get into backgrounds. And that now you want to have deeper, richer character backgrounds. And the reason, so from a GM side, right, the reason we like character backgrounds is we're, as GMs, always looking for elements that we can reincorporate into a game. So if you tell me about a village that you grew up in or an uncle that you had, like those are things that I could potentially reincorporate into future stories. That is going to build emotional investment, right? Like that's why we GMs are like, oh, we want some background. Give us the juicy background about your character.
Yeah.
On the flip side, like, what do you think? Like, what do you think background does for players?
So I really enjoy it because I think that it gives me an immediate place to start with a character, especially when it's a character that's brand new to me, or even when it's not, but it's just, it tends to feed how a given character would react in a situation or how I can tailor those reactions, and gives me a good basis for getting that emotional connection into a character and through them to the world.
Sure.
That's how I
that makes
see
sense.
Now, having said all of that, I think there is something we do probably need to mention, which is I am like completely all for getting people into having a rich backstory and all of those things. But I think that we have to mention in here somewhere that there are people for whom that's not the fun that they're getting out of gaming. Like, if you have people who are in it for the mechanical, the little bit more like war strategy aspects of gaming, if they want to do, peeps on map, and that's like doing the peeps on map and having the rules mastery and knowing exactly how to flank everything at all times, if that's the joy they're taking out of it, then maybe they don't actually care. And to be entirely honest, if that's not what people care about, right? If their focus is on that success in a strategic way, having a backstory is going to be an uphill battle for you because they're not going to care, right? It's just not where they're getting their joy out of it. Now, having said that, I get immense joy from making a character background, and there are definitely people who have been playing very strategically, and this is how I got into it, right? That they just haven't either realized that they could go that way, or they haven't been in a situation where they were encouraged to, or it was safe to do that kind of thing, or they didn't even know how to approach it. So I think that the tips that Phil was saying, and that we will continue to talk about, are very much for the people who fall into that category. But, we have to kind of put that caveat on there, right? That like, you can't drag people kicking and screaming away from the thing that they're enjoying into a thing that they don't know if they enjoy or not, if they're not into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because it actually it'll be a running theme with our second question.
It will
as well. So, and this really goes to a larger topic that I think we will spin out a future episode on somewhere in the future. Of course, our future episode would be in the future.
Really?
We'll spin out a future episode that will appear somewhere in the past. Good luck finding in our catalog.
Oh, good. Shove it through the wormhole, will you?
Right.
Just see where it ends up.
So I guess my point is, there is a discussion. So there's two parts to this. There's a introspection that one as a gamer should do about what is your fun in role-playing.
Yeah.
Like, you need to, as a player, understand what your fun is and what's not fun for you. And then you need to be able to convey that to others, right? And it's through that you'll come to understand things like, maybe background's not a big deal for you as a player, but if it helps the GM, putting together a simple background is, you're on board. Well, it is, helpful then to the GM, and it's fine. You'll do it. Maybe you don't like games that are, have rule books 2 inches thick or whatever. Like, whatever your fun is, like, it's an important thing to understand as you as a gamer and as a GM, and then to be able to kind of not only communicate that to the group, but also as a group, how do you sync all those things up? Future episode. Okay.
Future episode.
That said,
good.
We're going to assume that no one is openly repulsed by the idea of coming up with
Yes.
backgrounds, and that more likely they're just not familiar with how to do it.
Yes.
Okay. So if we do that, I'm going to say that my favorite tool for this is originally I learned it from the Amber Diceless role-playing game back in the 90s, which is the 20 questions. Now, don't hold yourself to 20. It could be 5, it could be 10, whatever. But the idea is that you come up with a list of questions and you just go around the table asking all the players. And they can be, they could be about the world. They could be about their past. They could be about each other. They could be about just something about their character. Like, like how do you dress? What do you think of the struggle between the orcs and the humans at the, like in the valley, like those, like whatever it is, like you kind of pick out like a bunch of questions, that'll be somewhat helpful for you. Like in terms of mining it for good material for reincorporation.
Yep.
But also a mix that will also get players to kind of think about themselves or think about the situation they're in. And then you just do that as like a session 0 or session 0.5 kind of thing. Like after they have characters, but before you start playing, you just like do this like round table questioning thing.
Sure. I'm going to bring up my new favorite, which is soon to be in my hot little hands, although it does sound like they are having some issues with COVID delaying production. But it will be here early in 2021, and that is Decama. I'm just going to throw it out there because that game, it's a mini game for world building and character creation and character relationships, right? So it does all 3 of those. I think that you could probably narrow it down if you just wanted background and personality stuff. But, why limit yourself?
Right. I mean, if you've got an open world kind of thing, or you're building a world at the same time, that's great. If you're playing with a GM who's got a world, maybe set up, maybe you don't want to do all of that.
Well, maybe, or it's very easy to blend those the card questions, because they're very open-ended, into an existing world.
Yeah, that's they just also become perfectly fun.
They become plot hooks. They're gifts to the GM. They're just plot hooks to get people involved. So I like bringing that one up because it is super good at creating all of those relationships, backgrounds, and world building. For me, it's almost difficult to distinguish the building of a character background from the building of relationships between characters. I frequently define things about my character's background by figuring out how relationships with other characters work. So it's also worth going back and listening to our episode about creating character bonds and pulling those into games where they aren't necessarily, because that really is another way that you can kind of just get people talking about what their background is, because to answer questions about bonds, you have to come up with some stuff about your background. And that's just kind of the way that it is. And it's neat when they go hand in hand, because then multiple people can be involved in that background, right? And it gives you more strings that are tied to more people instead of a bunch of individual strings tied to just individual characters. When you can rope in 2 or 3 or even the whole party in some level of backstory, that is the best. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So those kinds of relationship bonds, I will say another product that's great for those, that'll help with not only relationship bonds, but also kind of past events, is backstory cards.
Sure. Yeah. Those are great.
Those are great cards.
Yeah.
And those are just backstory. And they come in different flavors. So there's like a generic one, but there's also like a cyberpunky one, a sci-fi one, those kinds of things. So
yeah, super cool. So there's tools.
So yes, so I think the best way to sum it up, I think the best way to get players into it, assuming they're willing and that that it's a form of fun for them, is to do a directed, a guided effort. So where the GM guides the discussion through questions, through cards, through prompts, something like that. Because what it does is it takes some of the pressure off the players. Now, I will say the other thing: if your players are not great at on the spot.
Yes.
Right. So sometimes people don't like to do these round table discussion things because they feel like they're going to be put on the spot and they're not going to have a good answer. Like for the 20 questions, I used to just send those to my players like the week of the game.
Right.
And be like, hey, we're doing 20 questions.
Yeah.
And I would just send it out. Mm-hmm. And I'd be like, you could answer it for me, but like, you can just like, having seen the questions.
Right.
They could work on them. Like if they needed to work on them before the session,
sure,
they could jot some notes down. And if they didn't, and they just wanted to go off the cuff, then they would just ignore it and wait till the questions came up in the session. Right. Like,
sure.
Again, you want to be as accommodating as possible, because what you're trying to do is build a positive experience from it. Right. So you want to make the act of creating the background the least anxiety producing as possible, right? Yes. So if people don't want to ad lib, give them the questions in advance. They can write their stuff down and just tell it to you at the table. Yep. And then the other thing you have to do with this, right? So you get the background, you have to do the reincorporation, right? This is the loop, right?
Right.
You've asked them for stuff about their background. Now you got to use some of that stuff in a way that's going to make the game more exciting, because what that'll teach the players who haven't done this before is that, when I give an interesting background, cool stuff that pertains to my character comes up in the game.
Right. And that to be clear, that doesn't mean that every family member that anyone gave you is suddenly dead or kidnapped.
No, Lord, no. Some of them, it could just be that your uncle shows up happy to see you and buys everybody like dinner and rooms at the inn or something.
Right.
But that's still a piece of incorporation.
Yes. Yep. Okay, so just
good point.
Don't just make everything that happens to anybody in their backstory bad, because they will never give you anybody again. They'll all be orphans for forever.
Exactly. Do cool things. Have them show up when they, with supplies or, a respite or whatever.
Oh yeah, or like their old mentor shows up on the scene as they're losing a battle. When you're like, oh no, I don't want to do a TPK. Their old mentor shows up, sword flashing and
Exactly. It's good stuff.
Yep.
Okay. Good. I'm good. That was a good question.
I'm good. It was a good question.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave.
Okay. Cool. Our next question is from Ryan Bolter, Lord Neptune, on the Twitters, who does that other cool podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And his question was, how, as a GM, does one direct the spotlight onto the quieter folks in your group without putting them on the spot? Inversely, how to direct the spotlight away from the less quiet folks in the group?
Okay, so once again,
it's worth a conversation. And this is one of those moments I know you've seen it, Phil, but I'm going to describe this meme that went by on Twitter, right? Where someone was like, GMing advice, I have questions. And then the person was like, prepares like Wheel of Fortune spinner board with 2 spots. And it was like communication. And what was the other one?
And leave the group.
Oh, leave the group. Yeah.
It's like half
all of this is communication answers, right?
Well, I specialize.
Like a dating advice show, except for game groups.
I specialize in the communication part. I will advocate sometimes for leaving a group.
Yes.
I'm not afraid to use that, but I often believe that as long as you're dealing with decent people, a bit of communication will solve almost every problem. If you're not dealing with decent people, then fuck them. You got to eject them. Eject them or eject yourself and go.
You got to go. Anyway.
Okay. So let's go on the assumption. All right. So I want to go on the assumption that the subjects of Ryan's questions, these people who are quieter, they really do want to be spotlighted.
Yes, because there is, and this is why we have to caveat this, right? Because there are people who derive fun from the game from not necessarily super direct involvement, right? And I've played with these people. They've been in my games. They want to be there. They're part of the game. They're doing a thing. They're rolling their turns, but they don't necessarily want to be spotlighted.
I will tell you a worse... I will tell you a worse story.
Okay.
I, in my more asshole GM days, was the kind of person who would I'll fix someone of this problem.
Oh no!
Right?
Oh, no.
Like so. Again.
Oh no!
You don't want to fix it.
Oh no!
If it no. Right. You don't want to fix these things if that's not what the person wants in the game. Yeah. Now, if the person is just a bit quieter or a bit shy, really wants the spotlight and is at a table full of like,
Me.
real hams, right? Like a table of hams who really like to just chew scenes, right?
Me.
Yeah, like then yes, then there are some things you can do as a GM.
Yeah.
In fact, everything, like as a GM, you are not even remotely powerless in this situation, right? Like one of the fundamental things that almost every GM role has in a role-playing game is setting up the scene, like framing scenes and framing parts inside of a scene. So my best advice to this is where you use your powers for good, right? Like the way you set up scenes that puts the person that quiet person who wants to be in the spotlight, you just frame them a scene with them.
So the other thing that I will say is you frame them a scene with them, and then if a louder player kind of tries to come in, because louder players, and I fall into this category, right? A, we try to be helpful, and B, we might get involved when we probably shouldn't sometimes. And it is fair for you as a GM to say, hey, let's keep this scene about so-and-so, right?
Yep.
Like, you can do that. You have the power to do that. And the other piece of this, and this is something that I take on as a player responsibility, as well as a GM responsibility, right, is that it is my responsibility as a loud player. I am very aware. I just played very loudly and very investedly, and like I did everything in that last scene, or it was me and one other person, and we got really into it and everybody else was watching. Cool. I'm going to shut up for at least one scene. It is not my turn, right? And so that's an important thing in terms of player culture. And it's something that you can kind of teach people as a GM at the table by creating specific scenes for people. And then you nicely, like, you don't have to be mean about it, but you can just nicely say, like, cool, I'm going to get back to you in a second, but let's actually let them have the spotlight for a moment. Like, you could just say that at the table. And that,
you absolutely
that
should
is
say
okay,
that, right?
And you should do that. Yeah. So not only hand them the spotlight, but then defend the spotlight for them, right? If someone is trying to trample on the spotlight, it is your responsibility as a GM to defend that time and space for them if you need to, right?
Yep, I've had this come up a lot, less at my home tables, because my home tables are, one, pretty used to each other, and two, they're about even in terms of spotlight chewing, but I find this a lot at cons.
Yeah.
Like when I've gone to cons, and so the first part of it I will say is that very quickly size up your table. You'll figure out who the hams are and who like the quiet people are.
Yeah.
And then you just like, and this is like, whether you got to write it on a little note card in front of you, whether you just tuck it away in like the front of your brain, but you make it a point to make sure that those quieter people have their time to speak. And so spotlight is one thing, right? But also I will say you need to do the same things when it comes to like if they're making a plan or a decision. Like you need to just be like, cool, I hear what you guys are all saying. I really want to find out what Charlie's thinking. Charlie,
yeah.
what are you thinking right now? Right? Like
about this plan. Are you on board? Do you have any reservations or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is blatantly taking the GM role, right?
Yeah.
Of deciding who speaks when and framing what scenes come up and just using it for good.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I will say, this has just been my experience, is the longer that you play with a specific group of people, the less this happens. Because the more you kind of get to all know each other and everything sort of balances out, people who are quiet because they are shy or intimidated tend to get less so. Because it becomes a comfortable and safe space to be able to speak out, and they're not, as nervous anymore. And I know this because I also used to be that player. I'm not anymore, but I used to be, right?
Absolutely.
And so this is something that tends to happen a lot more in groups that haven't played together a lot, whether that's a convention thing or you're just starting out with a new group or you just brought someone new in to replace somebody who left or whatever it is, right? Those are the situations in which we usually really see this. It if it's ongoing, you've been playing together for like 2 years, and there's some poor person who is always trying to get a word in edgewise, and they still can't, like, there's probably a deeper problem and some other communication that needs to happen in terms of like just talking to everybody and being like, you really need to share the spotlight, other players, because I'm doing everything I can to defend this and they're not getting to talk. And it's fair to have that conversation too, right?
Yeah.
This is where we get back to communicating.
I mean, this is one of your goals as a GM is to make sure everybody at the table is having a good time.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is about creating a space for people. And sometimes, like you said, it's about defending that space.
Yes.
And if a player is just energetic and scene chewing, but is a good player, they're not going to take offense if you push them back.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like
people have pushed me back. I'm not offended. I'm just
right,
like, oh, like, cool, sorry.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, it really is, it's really fine. Like a good player will know, like good players, and I know you do this too, right? Like if somebody is like, looks like they're stumbling a little, they may want to jump in to kind of help the scene and help the person along. But sometimes if that person's just like a little slow to come up with ideas and they're working on it or whatever, like sometimes they don't really need somebody to jump in. So it's going to be like your line call as a GM, like whether you want to, like, defend the space or, you know, or be like, oh, hey, like, do you want Senda, like, you know, do you want Senda in this scene with you, or like have Senda arrive in the scene in the next minute or two? Yeah, cool. Okay, great. You know, like that's yeah,
it's an option, but it can be their choice.
It needs to be their choice.
Yeah.
If you what you're trying to do is take somebody who is quieter and giving them a voice, then you need to like let them kind of like, you need to get from them what they need out of the scene. Like maybe they don't want to be alone in a scene because it like puts too much spotlight on them. Maybe what they really like is they want to be in a scene with them and one other player because then they could speak up, but there's still like somebody else there.
Yes.
Like that.
Yeah. They don't feel like they're alone trying to figure everything out or whatever it is. Yeah.
Now, I will say this. If you are a player,
yeah,
right, learn what your comfort zone is. Right.
Yeah.
Do you want to be a leader type? Are you, you know, like what kind of gamer are you? And there have been many articles like way back in the day. Robin's Laws had like 6 of these different player types, like the drama queen, the whatever, right? Like the tactician, like all of those things. Like those, I think those are a bit dated, but I think that there's still some value to them. But as a player, like come to understand, like, because you'll help your GM greatly. You'll help your GM greatly if you're able to say to them, like, look, I know I'm really quiet, but I really like just kind of being like a secondary character or the second person in a scene or whatever. Like, I'm not really a spotlight person. Like, there's no shame in saying that.
Yeah.
If that's where you get your fun.
Yeah.
There's no problem saying that to a GM because the GM will be like, cool. And then they'll use you to pull you into other scenes, right?
Yeah.
But if you're like, oh, I really, really want to do this. I just like, I'm so intimidated because everybody's like such good role players or something. And you say that to the GM's going to make that space for you.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Yeah. I think that pretty much covers it. I will say somewhere back in our archives, there is an episode that is completely about Spotlight and sharing Spotlight. Mm-hmm. And I also know that in one of our recent player advice episodes, we actually talked specifically about, from a player perspective, how do you share Spotlight and bring people in? Because I also would say, like, it's important as a GM to do this. I think that it's also important as a player, especially as a loud player. At the table, I do see it as part of my responsibility also to make sure I'm not stomping on people, right?
Sure. I'm going to tack one more thing on, which is group composition, right? And I bring this up because you had a very unique experience. I can't remember if it was last Origins or the Origins before, but you wound up playing in a game of Turning Point that was all women.
Yeah. It was great.
Right?
Yeah.
And that may be the kind of thing that somebody needs, right? Like, is like a group that they feel more comfortable in, to go from being quieter to to being more, center stage kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think what that really is about, and this is what I was saying with like people you've gamed with for a long time versus people that you're just sitting down with at a convention table, et cetera, right? Like for a lot of folks, levels of shyness are going to be very much affected by how comfortable and safe they feel to, quote, mess up, unquote,
yep.
at that table. And so whatever that situation is that will make them feel more comfortable, if you can produce it. Sometimes you can't. Like, I can't sit down at a convention table and be like, cool, now we've all played together for 2 years. Like, I can't do that.
Correct.
But I can, I as a GM can set precedents in terms of how I introduce the game, how I introduce myself, how I, interact with each of the players and make sure even just, during introductions and that sort of thing, that I'm hearing each person and that where everybody's getting time in the same way. Like, there are things you can do to set up the expectations of table culture that are sort of little hidden things just about your presence at the table before you even start playing. So I will say that. And those are like key little tiny important things that I think many of us do without thinking about them super thoroughly. But like, if you really do just think about it as you're kind of doing it, and it's something that I have thought about to some extent just because of running convention games, right? Like I've done a lot of running convention games and one-shots with people that I've never played with before and may never play with again. And so there's a lot of how do I create the table culture that I want to play with when I just walk up to that table and start. And it starts with me, and it starts with exactly how I approach that table and exactly how I approach each of those people. So yeah, like it's one of those things that even just those tiny things at the very beginning, everything that you do to create a space in which people can be comfortable and trust you to do things like defend the spotlight for them if you need to. Everything that you do like that right up front at the beginning will make a difference. If you have to implement that stuff, it just will.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we could have a whole discussion about, but there are small things I do right down to even what I wear.
Yeah. I mean,
right? Like,
and this is where we get into like, and I tend to stand, right? Like, I mean, like there's just.
And I don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like
I know.
I don't. I'm a very big person.
Specifically
I
sit to not be intimidating. Yes. I stand because I don't feel like I can control a table.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, I will never stand at a table because I literally will loom over everyone and somebody's going to be uncomfortable. But I also do things like I often wear several Pride or, rainbow gaming pins.
Yeah.
Because I want people as soon as they sit down, especially because I'm cis, I'm queer, but you can't tell that by looking, right? So I'm like cis, I'm cis white middle-aged guy, right? Like you don't know when when you sit down across from me which type of gamer I am. So I I have several like gaming pride pins, rainbow D20s and things like, and I make sure that
the fate overcome my
fate overcome one, right? Like,
very good.
Yeah. So like I wear those. I mean, in part I wear those so that when people sit down, like they know like that, there's a queer person at the table.
Yeah.
Just, I don't like, we don't have to get into a whole thing about it, but there, like you said, there are things you do when you set the table.
Yeah.
And at a convention,
it's how you introduce yourself.
Absolutely. If you introduce yourself and immediately add your pronouns.
Yeah.
Like that is a big deal for people. Not everybody, but there are going to be people who, when you do it, are going to be like, oh, he said his name's, Phil, he, him. Like, okay. Like, cool. Like, they take that seriously.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you as a GM, that's just the thing. You as a GM, you are setting the table culture for your table. And it's all of those things. It's the little things about how people come in and how you say hi. And it's, how you introduce safety tools, I think, is a really big one in terms of creating and generating trust at a table quickly. Anyway,
how you react when someone makes a mistake.
Sure. Yeah.
You're like don't worry about it. It's fine. We're all just we're here to have fun, but here's here's the rule. Here's how that works. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay. And that's a whole separate.
We could spend a whole episode talking about the little things that we do in social situations as GMs to both to specifically create the style of space that we want to run a game in. That'll be a good future question
to put in the past for when we get closer to convention times again.
Sure. We should probably write that down.
Maybe a very good one.
Hey, yes. Bob, when you listen to this, you should write that question.
Hey,
down.
future Senda.
I'm not listening to this again. I don't edit this stuff anymore.
All right. We have one final question. We promised it would be a little silly.
It's great.
What's our final question?
So our final question is from Alice, who is magical girl magical girl Kira on Twitter, who asked us what was up with that guest spot the Ditch Lilies managed to get on DS9. Oh boy, I just saw this episode recently, actually.
Yeah. So I got to unpack a little background stuff, right?
Yeah.
So people, if you're new to the show, you probably don't know that we are the co-presidents of the Ditch Lilies fan club, the greatest 90s alt-rock, all-girl band that if you're in the know, you've heard of.
You've heard of them, but they're the greatest alt-90s girl band that you've never heard of. Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. So we gotta really unpack this thing a little because there's some things that connect up to how the Ditch Lilies. So specifically what Alice is referring to is that if you watch the episode Through the Looking Glass, the Mirror Universe episode, that in Quarks, when Cisco and his crew come in, and this is, Mirror Universe Cisco, right? And his crew come in, that in the background of Quarks, you will see all four Ditch Lilies. They're in the background.
They're
shot.
Part of his piratey rapscallion crew. Yeah.
But how did they get there is really what we want to unpack.
Yeah.
And to understand that, so we need to understand, all right, we got to go back and we got to talk about Ashley for a bit, right?
We do.
Our lovable bass player, somewhat pyromaniac bass player, right?
Yes.
A fashionista of sorts, right? She's very big fashion, loves her fashion, stuff like that. And that's because she grew up in Hollywood and her dad worked on the Next Generation, set.
Yeah.
So her dad is a special effects person, worked on the Next Generation set. And when she was little, she was actually an extra on a TNG episode as one of the kids in the background on the Enterprise.
Yeah, you remember that it's that episode where it'll come back to me. They have to use the computers in the children's schoolroom.
Yes, the ones where the Ferengi takes over the...
Yeah. She's one of the kids in the schoolroom. Yeah.
So Ashley's just, and Ashley basically grew up on the set of Star Trek. So huge Star Trek fan. So, fast forward, she's older, right?
Yep.
And again, she was now she's she was like an early teen in the Star Trek episodes. Now, fast forward, she's out on the road. We're into DS9.
Yep.
And the band, and this is really early on, right? This is shortly after they've played Seattle. They're all still some of them are, not all of them are even 20 at this point. Not all of them can even drink, and they're still gigging.
Yeah.
But fake IDs will go a long. Fake IDs and pretty smiles will go a long way.
Lily can sing wherever she wants.
Right. So they're in California, doing gigs, and one of the producers from DS9, who had also worked on TNG, sees Ashley, right? Knows Ashley's dad. They get a chatting, finds out that he's working on Deep Space Nine. She's a huge Deep Space Nine fan because on the road, she's made all the girls watch.
Yes, every
Star Trek.
Every episode. They couldn't miss it.
Right. She was the one who brought Star Trek to the rest of the girls.
Yes.
And so then she pulls a few strings to get them on as extras. Yep. Right? Nothing big, no speaking parts, just extras in the background of Quarks. They happen to be filming through the Looking Glass, and they needed a whole bunch of extras, especially humans, because they needed extra Terrans for those scenes. So sure enough, the Ditch Lilies wind up in the background.
As Cisco's crew, which is so perfect.
Exactly. Right? So yeah. So the Ditch Lilies on Deep Space Nine.
Working for Dom Kira.
Yes.
Leather-clad
Kira. Dom Kira.
Yeah.
This may explain a few things later in the Ditch Lilies about Michelle and Lily, but
mm-hmm. There's some stuff there.
But yeah. So that's the whole story about it. That's like how you get from Ashley as a young lady on the set of, at Paramount on the set of TNG all the way back around to how the whole band winds up on Deep Space Nine. Right?
Oh my God.
Fascinating.
We're such big nerds.
I love when my nerddom of the Ditch Lilies mixes with my nerddom of Star Trek, and it's so small, but it's such a good piece.
So good, and it's such a good episode.
Yeah.
It's like the dark fanfic version of DS9, and there they are. It was a really perfect place for them to show up.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right. Well, good. That was our third question. That's our grab bag. Hint, hint. We got a whole bunch of questions when we put this out onto Twitter. So November might have more grab bags. Yeah. But grab bags are fun. I like doing them. So
sure. Yeah.
And I like doing them with you.
Cool. I like doing them with you.
So anyway, we should probably head out of here. And the way that we find our way out of a grab bag episode is for you to first tell us about another show on the network.
Yeah. Today I'm going to tell you about the Gnome Cast, in which a bunch of gnomes get together and chat about a thing, sometimes a recent article that one of them wrote. Sometimes we did a series that was like the RPG a Day questions, and we answered them. And I know that there are some other cool ones coming up because I'm going to be recording some of them. So if you are not listening, you should check that out.
Indeed, indeed. Hey, Senda, where do people find us on the internet?
Well, you can find us on Twitter at Pandas Talk Games. You can find us in the Misdirected Mark forums, forums.misdirectedmark.com, which is also where you can find our DS9 watch parties, just in case you don't want to miss any more, cool cameos.
Episodes?
Yeah. Just saying. Or you can drop us an email, panda@misdirectedmark.com. And Phil, once they find us in one of those places, what can they do with that information?
Yeah, so, we just like today, we put out a call for some topics and you responded. When you respond, we take them, we make them into episodes. So sometimes we do grab bags out of them. Sometimes we do whole episodes. It's just whatever it is we need. By whatever, we love your questions. We want to answer them. So we'll find a way to make them happen on the show. It's really important to us. We would just sit around and talk about Deep Space Nine and Ditch Lilies all day.
I mean, obviously, we could.
But since you keep asking game questions, we actually want to answer them, right? Look, we have a great time entertaining each other. We have a great time hopefully entertaining you. But we also want to be relevant and useful, right? We want to make your gaming experiences better. And the way we do that is we take those things that are on your mind about gaming and apply what we know. And hopefully we give you some good advice that you can use to make your games a better place.
We should make a hack of our Ditch Lilies game that happens in space. And then we could have the Ditch Lilies in space.
We can talk about that.
Okay, let's talk.
We can totally talk about that.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
If you like what we do here, or elsewhere on the Misdirected Mark Network, please consider backing our Patreon campaign. Go to patreon.com/MMP. Patrons get access to our awesome Slack room for life, the epicenter of our online little collective. Great place to talk about recipes and food and humor and gaming and your day-to-day life. If you just need some spoons, some support, to a good laugh or whatever, it all happens inside our little Slack community.
If you would like to mock me
love them so much.
For misspelling crew, you could do that as well.
Yes. Should do that as well. We'll get to that in the after show. Anyway, okay. You get the bonus outtakes from the bonus outtakes / after show of this show. You get the after show from the Misdirected Mark. And there's other stuff in next year that maybe as we exit the pandemic and kind of return to normal, whatever normal is going to be after this, there'll be things that we'll share with our community. We love you guys. And, when energy is high and spoons are plentiful, like we like to give you stuff, like we really do. And in the meantime, right now, where spoons are low and it's honestly a little scary right now, we're huddled up. We're staying connected as a community, supporting one another, which sometimes with laughter and sometimes with compassion, things like that. So anyway, it is very special to me. And if you were so inclined, we'd like to make it very special for you as well. If you are already backing the Patreon campaign, thank you very much. If you are unable to back the Patreon campaign, listen, we totally understand. We don't want you, no pressure. This is, it's a completely voluntary thing, but there is a thing you could do for us. Just a little thing that you could do for us. Helps us greatly. Has been proven to work. So now I stand by it. And supports our If You Listen to Us, You Will Love Us campaign. What's that thing?
You could leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcast or the podcatcher of your choice. Every new review we get really does actually help new people find the show, which is pretty awesome. So we super duper appreciate it. And if you leave it somewhere that we're not going to spot it, will you tell us about it? Because it's just really heartwarming, and we could all use that nowadays as everything spikes again.
Absolutely.
We could use that like warm, fuzzy feeling. So drop us a note wherever. And thank you so very much to everybody who's already left a review. We really do appreciate them. They are so kind, and thank you for taking the time to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Say, Senda, show me how you are going to manage the spotlight in our next online game.
This show is a joint production of She's a Super Geek and Misdirected Mark Productions, the media arm of Encoded Designs.
Show me what you got, eh? Show me what you got. Show me what you got, eh? Show me what you got. Show me what you got, eh? Show me what you got. Show me what you got, eh?
Blooky.
Clicky. Hello and welcome.
Hello, I'm wearing a beret.
You are wearing a beret. Not a raspberry beret, like the kind you'd find at a secondhand store.
What?
Oh, boy.
I feel like this is a song.
It's a Prince song.
Sure. I have a pink one if that would make you feel better.
By the way, did you see where Rob made fun of you in Slack? Because you spelled Motley Crue wrong.
I should not be allowed to write the show notes.
Send it his baby.
Probably I should not. But that's what y'all get for trusting me to write show notes.
We are going to do a show because we're going to chat more at the end in our little after show bonus
our
outtake.
Little quote bonus outtake that is unedited, so it's not really bonus anymore.
Now it's after show.
More. Now it's after show.
Sure.
It's fine.
So
Good.
We should get started.
Sure, yes.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Boom, boom.
Oh, you're really rocking that out.
Yeah. Well, that's, the excitement.
I wish the rest of you could see the air guitar that happened.
Oh, yes. I'm a child of the 80s. That's what happens.
Good. Carry on. Yes.
And welcome to another episode of Pandas Talking Games. I am one of your hosts, Phil.
And I have to fix... Damn it.
Oh, my goodness. All right, well, we're going to do that again.
Yeah, we're going to do that again. I should have done this before we started recording. But I didn't.
Oh, boy.
Okay, it's just that I want to be able to see you, but also talk into the mic at the same time.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Here we go.
Try one more
Somebody's
time.
going to do a little editing this week.
Just a little bit. Just a tiny little bit. Just a little tiny. Little tiny bit. Petite. Yes.